Well, we are in the first chapter, but today we will complete the portions, the details actually, of the concept that Sri Aurobindo introduces here, that there is very little of temporality in the Gita and that it universalizes all that it introduces. And we can perhaps appreciate and understand this view in the light of what we did yesterday, to find out the place that the Gita has in the spiritual history of India. We have seen basically that it is a synthesis. In the line of the spiritual history, it is the third synthesis that we have in India. The first one being the Vedas, the second one was the Upanishads, third is the Gita, fourth the Tantra, the fifth Sri Aurobindo himself. And the Gita synthesizes most of the philosophical thought that preceded it, and also some of the major concepts that were discussed in the Vedas and the Upanishads. But in its synthesis, although it utilizes the old terminology because it keeps a continuity with the old concept, it changes the meaning and makes it more universal, the meaning of these terms. In fact, if we see, it's the same thing in Sri Aurobindo. He also uses the words Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga and Jnana Marga and all that. But he has also radically changed the meaning of all these words. It is not the Bhakti Yoga of the Gita or the Karma Marga of the Gita. So this is what I suppose each synthesis does. They use the old terminology to keep up the continuity, the sense of continuity, but they each time enlarge its meaning and make it more contemporaneous and also going beyond the boundary of those times. So we saw, if this is the trend that the Gita followed, Sri Aurobindo gives us a few pertinent examples of this universalization. And what are these examples? We have seen the first example of the fourfold order, and then we have another example, another explanation I would say, of the same concept of the fourfold order. Yesterday we did introduce the idea that the concept of the fourfold order, it has the three dimensions: the economic, the cultural and the spiritual dimensions. And also, perhaps we should add here a psychological dimension too. Here I read out a paragraph from the same book, the Essays on the Gita, page 497. The para beginning with, and we see in fact that the Gita itself indicates very clearly its intention when it describes the work of the Brahmin and the Kshatriya not in terms of external function, not defined as learning, priest work and letters or government, war and politics, but entirely in terms of internal character. The language reads a little curiously to our ear: calm, self-control, ascesis, purity, long-suffering, candor, knowledge, acceptance and practice of spiritual truth would not ordinarily be described as a man's function, work or life occupation. Yet this is precisely what the Gita means and says, that these things, their development, their expression in conduct, their power to cast into form the law of sattvic nature are the real work of the Brahman. So this is the main idea that we discussed also yesterday. The psychological background of these four castes, what we call Brahmin and Kshatriya and Vaishya and Shudra, these are not works, these are qualities. In fact, in another place he explains that what connects matter with spirit is a quality and not a quantity. Like we say, we aspire to the divine, we pray to the divine. What is it? Prayer is a quality. Compassion is a quality. Love is a quality. It's not material thing. So he says always the connection between the material and the non-material is qualitative and not quantitative. Therefore, here, when they have the concept of the Brahman, it's more the quality. That means the qualities of purity, candor, long-suffering, knowledge, acceptance of spiritual path. So anybody who practices this, knowledge, candor, long-suffering, acceptance of the spiritual, acceptance and practice of spiritual path, he is called a Brahman. And to increase and to develop these qualities is the work of a Brahman. So wherever he is, he increases knowledge. He imparts his knowledge. He really has a spiritual attitude and encouraging others also to have this kind of an attitude. This transparency and candor that he has, he practices in real life. So we see Brahmin is not one who is born a Brahmin, but one who practices these qualities. And that is the basic concept that the Gita accepts. And similarly, we see that a Brahmin is one who encourages learning, religious ministration and other outer functions are only its most suitable field, a favourable means of this inner development, its appropriate self-expression, its way of fixing itself into firmness of type and externalized solidity of character. So this question of a religious ministration is a work of a Brahmin. It's a work given to him because this is more or less an ideal field for him to spread spiritual knowledge. If you ask a Brahmin to go to the bazaar and spread the spiritual knowledge, that is not an ideal spot, it's not an ideal place. A temple or a church, these are more the ideal places. So this kind of a environment suitable to spread knowledge, that ultimately became the spot where Brahmins really spread their knowledge. Say for example, these days we say, if you want to learn about Sri Aurobindo, you go to this place, this center. If you go to learn about Sri Aurobindo to Ramakrishna Mission, you will not be able to learn that. So for having a particular knowledge, you have to go to a particular spot, a particular place. So for a spiritual knowledge, the Brahmin said, the church or the temple courtyard, the veranda of a temple, these are the ideal environments. But later on what happened, we connected that the Brahmin must be in a temple alone. But it need not be so. Today sitting at Sakar, we can speak of spirituality, we are learning about Sri Aurobindo. This, as somebody has in fact called it, a temple of knowledge. So you don't have to have knowledge in a temple. It can be a knowledge place. Wherever there is knowledge imparted, that itself becomes a temple of knowledge. So you see, now we have got a wider meaning. So Brahmin is not one who is in the temple. Brahmin is one who really imparts knowledge anywhere in a particular spot. So that's how we see a universality. A college or a university were supposed to be temples of knowledge. I'm saying supposed to be. because they aren't anymore. In those olden days, when we had this great Nalanda University and all these places, they were truly the temples of knowledge. The discipline, the asceticism, the candor, the seriousness, the involvement, the sincerity from the part of the students as well as the teachers. That atmosphere doesn't exist in our universities at all. So we desist from saying that those are temples of knowledge. They're supposed to impart knowledge, but midway. So that's why Sri Aurobindo tells us these are appropriate self-expressions of the Brahmin. Similarly, we have war, government, politics, leadership. We have war, government, politics, leadership, and rule are a similar field and means for the Kshatriya. But his real work is the development, the expression in conduct, the power to cast into form and dynamic rhythm of movement, the law of the active, battling, royal or warrior spirit. You see, there is the other aspect, which is that of actually the aspect of, the aspect of real power to cast into dynamic movement an ideal. You see, it's not sufficient to have knowledge or an ideal. You should be able to give it a form, a dynamic sustenance. And this kind of, if I say this is an ideal of a social order, you should be able to put it in society and follow it. But this who does? This is the work given to a Kshatriya. Kshatriya is not again a caste. One who does this governance, one who does this warfare, one who arranges this dynamic rhythm and movement of law, he is called the Kshatriya. So you see, it is all by the qualities that you have that you are known as a Kshatriya, not by the work. And similarly, we have the other castes also. We have the work of the Vaishya and Shudra is expressed in terms of external function. And this opposite turn may have some significance. For the temperament moved to production and wealth getting or limited in the circle of labor and service, the mercantile and the servile mind are usually turned outward. Now this is again a very fine definition that Sri Aurobindo brings in here. You see, the first two are different categories. One is that of knowledge, the other is that of power. And those two are more inward. They are more inward looking. Whereas the other two, the Vaishya and the Shudra, that is the mercantile and the servile, these are more outward looking. That means, you produce wealth, you distribute it, you spread it equally. And then there's a question of the services. So temperamentally, and at least we see that now rampant in our country and in the world, what you call the business class, those are doing a multinational business and this and that. Per se, their nature is more outward jumping. They want contact with people, they want to really spread their goods, they want to do this. So this is all the time they are going outwards. So psychologically and temperamentally, these two, the Vaishya and the Shudra, are more or less characteristic of an outward looking person. For example, in the Brahmin class, there's not only knowledge teaching shastras, but an artist, a painter, a dancer, a musician. They're all Brahmins because they are giving a kind of a science of art. They are imparting a wonderful art. And what is the temperament? Always inward looking. So this entire category of the artists and the knowledge people, this is an inward looking class. So you see, those people cannot match with the business class because they are always outward looking. And there's a deeper truth that we have discussed yesterday, but we would like to add something more. You see, these questions of knowledge, power, then there is wealth, and there is the service. These are actually powers of the divine Aditi themselves. So why are we forgetting that these are not just powers created by the human society. What the Vedas told you as the four limbs of the Supreme Avatar, of the Supreme Divine, the head and the limbs and the stomach and the hands and the legs. So these were what the Vedas told us. But today what we know from Sri Aurobindo is that these four aspects of the power and the knowledge, etc., are the four aspects: Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi and Mahasaraswati. So you see, these are an eternal characteristics of this creation itself. We cannot deny this, we cannot shun away from it. So in India, if you have called somebody Brahmin and Kshatriya, it is not something out of the place. They have only nomenclatured it. But these are eternal realities. And yesterday we saw Gita explaining to us that these are eternal qualities. So you see, this is, I find, a complete synchronization of the whole meaning. So casteism is not wrong in its essentiality. But when it becomes a fossilized body caste, birth caste, then it becomes an evil thing in the society. Because if I say I want to be a teacher and I don't know ABC of English language, I have not read anything about the scriptures or anything about Sri Aurobindo, and I say, no, today there's a talk by Dr. Ananda Reddy on the first chapter of the Life Divine. When I'm incapable of doing it and I show that I can be a professor of Life Divine, and when I come and speak here all rubbish, so this is the disharmony that comes in. I want to pretend to be a Brahmin and I want to speak on the Life Divine, and I do not know, I have not done anything. I'm more interested in the construction work. So you see, this is where Sri Aurobindo also would speak in the human cycle. In fact, that is one of the ideals given to Aurobindo. Each one expresses his own innate capacity, innate talent. It's not something enforced upon you. So this is the innate talent that is really given the chance to grow. So here we have the same reasoning that develop your qualities. And once you develop your qualities, you may be known as a Brahmin or not known, it is immaterial. What is important is to manifest your quality. So let's forget this question of the Brahminism. In the South, there's a lot of conflict on this question of Brahmins and the non-Brahmins. And all this is nonsense. At least today, in this present times, at least in this audience of Aurobindonians, we should completely erase this Brahmin by birth concept, or Kshatriya by birth concept, or Shudra by birth concept. In fact, if we want to be honest with ourselves, we should say we are all Shudras today. There is no Brahmin, there is no Kshatriya, there is no Vaishya, or there are Vaishyas. Actually, there are only Vaishyas and Shudras. Because we are all workaholics. Nobody goes for knowledge. We are all the time work. And all the time produce this kind of a goods, mercantile. We have all the multinational businesses becoming global business and all that. So there are only these two castes now. Previously the other two dominated, the Brahmin and the Kshatriya, because those were the periods. And also if you analyze human history and the social history, you will see that these four aspects of the Mother, of the Divine, have had one particular yuga for itself. What we call the Golden Age. What is that in Sanskrit, the Golden Age? We have the four yugas, Dwapara Yuga, Kali Yuga. All these yugas are belonging to one predominant deity, one predominant aspect of the Mother. The first one, the Golden Age, obviously belongs to the Maheshwari aspect. Then comes the Dwapara to Kali Yuga. To Mahakali. So today this Kali Yuga is the age of Mahasaraswati, where there is a predominance of the work and perfection in work. Today the whole focus is on perfection of work. And who is the predominant deity of the perfection of work is Mahasaraswati. So whatever we want to do today, the whole, you see, even the ashram, the predominance is perfection in work. So see, there is a time spirit which we cannot avoid. Centuries back it was Mahakali who was predominant. All over the world there were wars, governance, change of this thing, there were colonization, there were conquests. All the while, it is as if, the Maheshwari gave the concept of the new world, of the world organization, and Mahakali carries out this concept and of the nations, the warheads, the forming of the nation souls, etc. And then on the third level came the industrialization, the mercantile, where the production of the wealth came in. Once the form was given to the world, the wealth started coming in. That is the industrial revolution. From there till now, we have the same thing going on. And then in the present times, we have the perfection in work. So you see, there is a wonderful rhythm in the manifestation of these four powers. It is not happening at random. In fact, the mother once told somebody here that the history of the civilizations must be rewritten. Because in the normal history, we have only dates and wars and who has won, who has lost. And we don't even remember. But that also divides a country. But if we have this vision, the global vision, that it is all a movement of one single consciousness of the Supreme Divine, then you see a kind of a global consciousness that comes into you. Now, I do not really separate the Indian history from the British history or the German history. For me, it is one cosmic earth history which is happening in the mother's consciousness. So therefore, we find a kind of a meaning, a direction in the evolution of this earth. Otherwise, there is all some small details, important, not important, and lot of them twisted and perverted details. So that is the present history. Don't you remember in the mother's own recollections of her childhood, she said in the beginning when she started reading history books, suddenly she would tell her brother, this is wrong. I'm sure the kid at that time. But still she would say, this information is wrong. This is not what he did. This king or the queen or whatever. They did it, this was not the way it was done. Because she could read through, and the historians have really twisted the whole thing, put it according to their own whims and fancies. So you see that, therefore we see lot of history is untrue. It depended on the individual's beliefs, his policies, his political lineage, whatever. So these are again instances to show that history should be rewritten in a new angle. In fact, a personal note on that, again it was long back in the 70s sometimes, my father had written to the mother something about this, and the mother had approved this idea because she had already told some teachers in the ashram that history should be rewritten. And my father called it the mankind on the march. And he wanted to make a big project out of it, where different scholars would be engaged, different areas in literature, in sciences, in history, in art, in all kinds of things. And we see whole history as a global venture in the light of the spiritual consciousness. Because we have to see it from a new angle, that this evolution is the evolution of consciousness. And where you and me and every country is only a tool of expression of this consciousness. So if we can really have this global vision, it would give us what Sri Aurobindo would really want, the futuristic vision of the history. So we still have that project, Mankind on the March. It is there on the shelves. And I'm still waiting to start it, because maybe the right persons will come and the right time will come. Because of course those who would take up this venture have to be thorough with Sri Aurobindo's vision as well as their own topic. So that is one project that Sakar is still to take up, and let's see when we can. So this is the background. Now we'll go back to the chapter. So we have covered the most important ideas in this fourth paragraph. That is the words of sacrifice and the fourfold order. And now I'll come to the next para beginning with, nor shall we deal in any other spirit with the element of philosophical dogma. Well, here again we get into a little more details where I will sort of give you the outline, because these are the philosophical ideas. You see, please remember what is the structure we are following. That Gita is universal in its approach. In what ways? Number one, all the idioms that it uses from the past are given a new interpretation so that they become universal and not necessarily to the Indian culture and background. Number one. In fact, in this context, I remember a letter from Sri Aurobindo to a Muslim gentleman in the ashram. His name was Dara, I think. He was the first Muslim disciple here. And, as it happens, we cannot forget our religion so easily. So at a point of time, he revolted and wrote to Sri Aurobindo that you are encouraging Hinduism and really all the ashramites are really looking down upon Muslims, and I feel the vibration that I am suffering, etc., etc. These are not his exact words, but this is the content. And he also kind of accused, in a way, Sri Aurobindo saying that he is also promoting Hinduism because all the terms that he has used are from Satchidananda and Brahman and Atman and Kshara Purusha, Akshara Purusha. So Sri Aurobindo wrote back saying that it's just because he happens to be in this environment, in this background of India, that he has used this terminology of Brahman and Satchidananda, etc., etc. He says, if anyone can write this in a different terminology, he says, I don't mind it at all. If Islam or Christianity has its own terminology equivalent to Sri Aurobindo's experience and concept, he says you can use Trinity or you can use Allah, you can use any word. What is important is the concept, the experience behind the concept. So he says, I am not attached to that. So this way we see Sri Aurobindo has used terms which are Indian in origin, but they can have some other terms also. Although he has universalized the meaning of Satchidananda, but if somebody says, no, my concept of Trinity or my concept of the Holy Ghost is the same thing, fine. In fact, in one of our explanations, Mother would say, Aditi is none else but Mary. So you see, Mary and Aditi are same. So she says the conceptual wise they're the same. So we have no quarrels with that. If Christianity says, no, Mary is our Aditi, fine, go ahead. So why do we quarrel about terms? Quarrel about if you have the experience or not. So like that, there could be, in fact, the same concept of Aditi or the Supreme. She says in China it is Tao. Fine, no quarrels about it. So we are not trying to be dogmatic saying Aditi means only you must call the mother Aditi. If you want to call her Mary and do your pranams, wonderful, why not? So you see, we don't go by these externalities. What is important is the inner consciousness. So we have several examples where Mother and Sri Aurobindo have been extremely flexible. They are not trying to be dogmatic saying, no, because I call Satchidananda or I call Aditi, no way. So that's what the Gita has done in terms. Second, Gita's philosophical ideas. Now what are these? This is the para that tells us now. Nor shall we deal in any other spirit with the element of philosophical dogma or religious creed, which either enters into the Gita or hangs about it owing to its use of the philosophical terms and religious symbols current at that time. Now when the Gita speaks of Sankhya and Yoga. We shall not discuss beyond the limits of what is just essential for our statement. The relations of the Sankhya of the Gita with its one Purusha and strong Vedantic coloring of the non-theistic or atheistic Sankhya that has come down to us, bringing with it its scheme of many Purushas and one Prakriti, nor of the Yoga of the Gita, many-sided, subtle, rich and flexible to the theistic doctrine and the fixed, scientific, rigorously defined and graded system of the Yoga of Patanjali. Now, what do we find here? You see, the word Gita does use the concept from Sankhya. Now, just a word, because some of you may not know the philosophy of Sankhya. Well, not that I am going to give you any detail, but just as much as is useful for us to understand the Gita, we would say the Gita uses the word Sankhya and also the concepts of Sankhya philosophy. Now, Sankhya philosophy is one of the oldest philosophies, what we say darshanas of India. To the extent it was almost parallel to some of the later Upanishads also. So it is, this philosophy is pre-Gita period, and it is contemporary with lot of Upanishads. So we find its reference in many Upanishads, also in the Gita. So that is what had really guided those people at that time. You can imagine why it was so. Because what is the essential philosophy of Sankhya? Now, Sankhya, the word itself is Sankhya. Sankhya is numbers. But Sankhya is also right knowledge. So it is not the philosophy of numbers, it is not a numerology. It is of right knowledge. It has been known as Sankhya because it has given 24 steps or 25 steps of creation. How the whole creation began from Prakriti downwards. So it is called the numbers, the 25 steps of creation. In fact, this is perhaps the only philosophy in India which has given the details of the creation, the steps of the creation itself. Like we have vaguely in the Bible how God created the first day, this came, second day, this came, third day, and then luckily God of the Bible had the seventh day to rest. But unfortunately the Brahmin of India doesn't have rest at all. He doesn't have Sunday or Monday. He keeps on creating eternally. But this is the creation that came in. So Sankhya gives us the steps of creation. But the real thing is the right knowledge. So when Gita is referring to Sankhya, it is not interested in those 7 or in those 24 steps of creation. It is interested in its basic concept. And the basic concept is that of Purusha and Prakriti. And Purusha, that too not the psychic being, but what they call the witness Purusha, the Sakshi Purusha, the witness Purusha. And you can imagine this was the oldest philosophy, because just after the Upanishads, like we saw yesterday in our analysis of what is happening over the ages, the Upanishads and the Veda, they were really mind-centered, if I can say, all through the question of meditation, the question of really cutting off yourself from the world, detaching yourself from this earth. And for that, they use the process of meditation. And Sankhya also gives you the process of meditation as the basic way to detach yourself. Because there they said there is the Prakriti and Purusha. The Purusha is the inner consciousness. But here we can say that if we have, say we have the witness Purusha here, then we have in front the whole Prakriti. Now this Prakriti consists of our mind, heart and body. And the witness Purusha has nothing to do with this. Nothing in the sense, it is silently there, just giving its consent. It is like the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, who says, okay, this project is fine, go ahead. But once the CEO says, the executive body, that is the Prakriti, has to put into execution, into success, the entire plan. So this is exactly what is happening to us, the human beings. We have the witness Purusha within, it gives a consent, and then these are the mind, body, emotions which really execute the orders. So this executive aspect is called Prakriti. That's why Mother in one of our conversations explained, women are the best executive people because they are the Prakriti. By nature they can execute much better than men because they can get into the details of execution, whereas the men cannot get into the details. They are more an overall thinking. They are more a kind of a, there's a general planning. The execution is better done here. And I'm sure this is what our multinational companies are realizing, especially in the West, I've seen already. A lot of these women are here on the executive board because they are much better off. And at least I saw in Thailand too, most of the executive persons were ladies. The men were more or less the planning group. But when it comes to manifestation, they are better. Well, of course, we see the same thing between them. That's a fantastic example. Without him I exist not, and without me he cannot manifest, is unmanifest. So manifestation means the Prakriti, it means the Shakti, it means the Prakriti. Now coming back to this, now what is happening, this Prakriti, which has the nodus of ego, he after a while usurps, I'm using the word usurping, the rights of the witness Purusha. He tells his mind, body and this thing that forget about that president who is only a kind of a rubber stamp thing. I am the real Prime Minister. You have to obey me. So this president, this witness Purusha goes around looking at Singapore and Malaysia, visiting here, talking around, but he doesn't execute, he doesn't put in his orders. So the ego is the Prime Minister. It may be a weak Prime Minister in one or a strong Prime Minister, but he is the real person who controls these things. So therefore what happens, the Prime Minister takes over and this Prakriti is in haywire. It goes pell-mell. It doesn't have order, it is full of desire, it is full of all the egoistic ventures that I want it, I am the great man, the whole I comes in, and where the I comes in, the you becomes a mess. The universe becomes a mess. But sometimes the witness Purusha says, look, I didn't consent like this. You are going astray. So it pulls back its consent. And when it pulls back its consent, suddenly you see all your plans have collapsed. You say, no, I was doing it well till yesterday. I thought I was doing this sakar, all these plans, and the building was going on. Suddenly nothing has happened. So this is the withdrawal of the consent of the witness Purusha to Prakriti. So in what all we do, there's got to be a kind of a silent consent. Without the silent consent of the witness Purusha, Prakriti can't act. But once the consent is given, Prakriti plays mischief because it goes under ego. So I'm putting it in, of course, a little easy terminology. Because they do not explain it in this way. But now what is the connection I am trying to drive at? That the witness Purusha is what is important in the Sankhya. So they say by the process of meditation, we can bring in a kind of a distance. Because now, at present, we are not even aware of our witness, of our Purusha. I think that my ego is my Purusha. If you say, who are you? I say, I am Dr. Ananda Reddy. Who is the damn doctor? It's the damn ego. So you see, every time I am Professor so and so. Who is the professor? No, nobody but the ego. The soul doesn't say, I am the professor. It's the ego which says that. So we are all the time in this kind of a false appearance. So the witness Purusha says, the Sankhya says, we have to bring a kind of a distance. It's like, we're seeing into the water and thinking that is myself. That's only my reflection. That's not myself. So why is a withdrawal? This is coming back. This is a withdrawal from Prakriti. And this process of withdrawal is beset by meditation. So the purpose of meditation, according to the Sankhya, is not the question of attaining the Brahmanhood and all that, but to be able to distinguish the Prakriti and me, the real self, and not the ego. So whole life goes, because all the time we are here in this outer body. But during the moments of meditation, you begin to get glimpses that you say, hey, really? This is a story that was given to us in the Upanishads also. The gods and the devils, Indra goes to a rishi and says, teach me who I am, or show me who I am. Then the rishi says, go and look yourselves in the mirror, in the water. Both the Asura and Indra, they go and look at their reflection in the water, and they both see their own faces and they say, hey, how beautiful I am. So this is me. But Indra after a while says, you throw a pebble into the water, the whole reflection is gone. So then Indra says, oh my God, this cannot be me. If by a little pebble, if I am gone, who is this me? So this body is not me. Whereas the Rakshasa and the Asura says, no, that is me, you see. The outer reality is the Asuric consciousness, which think that body alone is the truth. Then they go back. Indra afterwards goes back to the rishi and says, that is not me, the body is not me. Then who is me? So like that, they are taken step by step until they realize that the me is someone else. So we have stories, these are all not really things of the present or Sri Aurobindo has given us. We have all this in the Upanishads and the Vedas. If only we have time to read that. But thanks to Sri Aurobindo, he has given us all this in a synopsis in all his writings. So Sankhya, its main effort is to split your Prakriti and Purusha, so that you realize that you are the witness Purusha. And why does the Gita take this up? And mind you, even Sri Aurobindo takes up this question of Purusha and Prakriti. This has come into integral yoga also. So you can see its validity is centuries old, but it is also as modern because it's part of integral yoga itself. In integral yoga, of course, I'll tell you that later, but in the Gita, this is the first step. He says, otherwise we are all the time lost in this outer personality, the ego personality, and in our great education system and the present modern system, develop your personality. What the hell is the personality is this? To increase your ego is your development of personality. But we say, develop your person, the true person, discover the true person, not develop your ego personality. So these are the opposing views that we have in integral education and other education. However, Sankhya is that wonderful method to split your being. Split in the right sense, not you become a split personality. But split means you begin to realize that I am truly not Prakriti. And who is Prakriti? Prakriti is only my instrument. But is it really an instrument? It takes time. But during the meditations, at least I can get a kind of a distancing. The word splitting may be wrong. The right word is distancing myself from my Prakriti. And that you will realize in the meditations. So do not think that meditation means just having silence of mind, throwing away my ideas and pushing somewhere a kind of a silence in my mind. But also push away the whole nature, the emotions, the thoughts, the body. And how do you push it away? There's a wonderful method given by the Buddhists. Denying yourself, saying, I am not the body. I am not this thought. I am not this emotion. So completely self-denial, the rejection of the oneself, of your own self, of your own Prakriti self. Then this constant rejection brings you closer to who you are. So this is the method that Gita took up. Why? We have known now the secret we said yesterday. What does the Gita emphasize upon? Not on the Brahman, but on this fellow, the Sakshi Purusha. Because it says that witness Purusha is me, the immanent divine. So if you have to concentrate on me, take up this Sankhya method of distancing yourself. Now coming to integral yoga, this is bonus, this is not part of the course. But coming to integral yoga, how do you realize that? That this distancing also we want, but not necessarily through meditation, remember. This distancing is what the Mother and Sri Aurobindo would call as self-awareness. You become conscious of your mind, of your thoughts, of your emotions, of your vital energies, of your desires. The more you become conscious, Sankhya said, or the Buddhist method said, you adapt the method of I am not. But integral yoga says, I am. I am this thought, I am this emotion, but this emotion and thought that is within me now, may it be offered to the Mother, to the Divine. It's not that I own it, but it's not that I disown it. Because after all, the thought has come into me. But what I do, this thought, I make it an offering to the Divine. This emotion, I lay it at the feet of the Divine. So what's happening? I'm having a wonderful experience of the Prakriti, because in Sri Aurobindo, remember, we cannot reject anything. We have to transform things. So instead of rejecting the Prakriti, I am putting Prakriti at the feet of the Divine for the sake of transformation, not for the sake of enjoyment. So you see, it becomes a wonderful, now you can see the advancement of the integral yoga over Gita and over Sankhya. So that's how we see that we have to reinterpret. Gita has reinterpreted the Sankhya, and Sri Aurobindo has reinterpreted the Gita itself. So this is the major Sankhya idea, but there is a fallacy here. That is a fallacy of the Sankhya which the Gita does not accept. Sankhya has made one major blunder in its philosophy, which has been of course criticized by Shankaracharya and every Acharya afterwards, and which of course Gita rejects. That's what you should know, because the moment Sankhya is there, you should not think that Gita accepts the Sankhya. Gita has accepted this, rejected its blunder. What is its blunder? In the creation, Sankhya says there is one Prakriti, and then there is the soul or the Purusha. It says this Purusha has come down into multiplicity. into all these individual forms. And then it has become many Purushas, many souls. Whereas here Prakriti is one, it has come down into different levels of, mind and the buddhi and all that, the senses, the instrumentation, all the 25 steps. But it has remained one. So the blunder is where? Where is the mistake that Sankhya has done? One of them is that they have got a dual reality, Purusha and Prakriti. And they say the Prakriti starts creating when there is a reflection of the soul or Purusha into Prakriti, it starts creating. So they have two realities. It's not one Brahman or one Satchidananda, it's two Purusha, two realities. Number one. Number two, that's what he was telling us, that how can Prakriti exist without the Purusha, independent of Purusha. That is the first blunder. Second blunder is, they say there are many souls and one Prakriti, which is just the opposite. There's only one soul and many bodies. The soul within and the soul within you and me is not cut up. Whereas your body and my body has a distance. But the soul is not partitioned. So this is where the problem comes in. Because remember, what is this soul? When we say, I have a soul, you say, you have a soul and you have a soul. Is it that we have got 1 billion souls? No. It is like, you have been to any of these temples, not this forts, this ancient Rajasthan forts, or some in Europe also I've seen. And recently I was seeing the movie called Mughlayism. There is this mirror hall, hundreds of small mirrors. There's only one person dancing, but you see 10,000 dancers there on the wall. That is the soul. There's only one Brahman, maybe dancing or chanting or meditating, I don't know what he's doing. But we are the mirrors, the individual million mirrors, or 1 trillion mirrors, or an infinite number of mirrors. So there are not so many souls, there are so many reflections of the Brahman. Whereas each mirror is constructed different. Mirrors can be big, mirrors can be small, mirrors can be dirty, mirrors may be convex, mirrors may be concave. They can be every form and shape and possibility of mirror. So when a concave mirror is there, the soul is reflected in a different manner. The convex mirror in a different manner, a small one. So we are only mirror images, mirrors which are reflecting. And the only problem is, we have gathered a lot of dust on these mirrors. We are not taken care. Only women go and say, mirror, mirror, who is the most beautiful of all? But I do not know if you can say, mirror, mirror, who is the best soul of all? Because you can't even see it. So the only thing needed is the cleansing of the mirror. The more you clean, that is called the process of purification and rejection in sadhana. It's nothing big, nothing really difficult. But cleaning your mirror, that is exactly, realization is nothing but this. The moment the reflection is clear, then you say, hey, this is me. And what does it happen? It was always there, reflection was there, only dust on me. You keep on cleaning, rejection, purification, and that you do by self-offering. So aspiration is you wanting to clean the mirror, dusting is rejection, and surrender is really this question of how do you do this? This dust will keep on coming back, That's the problem. So if you give it at the mother's feet, it will not come back. Because the divine absorbs this dust once and for all. So this is the whole process of yoga in a simplified manner. But this is the mistake which the Gita rejects. Because it says there is only one Purushottama, and it is this Purushottama who is in all of you. So this question of the blunder of the Sankhya, Gita doesn't take, nor does Sri Aurobindo. Both of them reject. So we accept there is one Purusha and not one Prakriti. Of course, Gita doesn't speak so much about Prakriti. It has the question of, he says, Gita also says Prakriti is there, then there is, Purusha is there, then he speaks of Para Prakriti and Apara Prakriti. So there is also the concept that Prakriti is of Purusha. And in Sri Aurobindo, this Prakriti of Purusha becomes the Shakti of Purusha. So in Gita it is Prakriti of, the nature of. But in Sri Aurobindo, that nature becomes Shakti, the power, transforming power of the Supreme. So we have those famous words in the Mother. The Mother is the consciousness and power of the Supreme. The word of is the important word. So she is the Shakti of Sri Aurobindo. So that is the question of the consciousness. So you see, this is where there's again a little transformation that takes place in Sri Aurobindo. So that's what it is about Shakti, about Sankhya. Well, I think we need to take a little break.